Popular Mexican YouTuber and alleged former narco Camilo Ochoa was shot down in his home on August 16, 2025. For those of us that have been following him throughout the last couple of years, we've seen him ruffle feathers with a lot of powerful people. He found himself in dangerous company on a flyer passed out by the Maísa, which had Marquitos Toys, Camilo Ochoa, and many other popular YouTubers on it, claiming that they worked for the Chapiza and were money launderers. He found himself on one of the infamous flyers that was supposedly passed out by the Maísa, calling out famous YouTubers like Marquitos Toys and Camilo Ochoa and claiming that they were money launderers for the Chapiza. We covered his passing on this channel. We also covered a video that he left in the event of his demise, something that he wanted to come out if anything happened to him. We also covered a video of him with Luis Chaparro on a phone call behind the scenes that Chaparro did not know was being recorded about the arrest of El Mini Leak. Luis Chaparro recently sat down with Gusgri of the Double G podcast, a podcast that was truly the first to introduce Camilo Ochoa to the world, to the internet world at least. And they had some interesting things to say about what Camilo was mixed up in before his demise and, some of the things and experiences that they had and went through with him. The entire interview is in Spanish, but I'm here to break down and give you the gist of it in English. Interesting enough, these guys have met before. They had an interview in California. They also had an interview in El Paso that Luis Chaparro hosted. With this one, they're in Mexico, and they are speaking about how Luis Chaparro has to roll around with security, how it's a risk for him to have meetings in Mexico and do things in Mexico, and he basically has to have a little heads up so that he can get his security in play. It seems like a part of his business that has changed over time, and he doesn't walk around as freely as he used to. He speaks about how, even just a year ago he was able to pack a bag and roll out on his own, but the way things have moved with YouTubers and journalists over the last year and the way things are going, he doesn't have that freedom anymore. He gets his team together and he makes his move. For those of us that were following, we know how Camilo was on the internet. Relentless. Once he got his platform, he was pushing his agenda as hard as he could push his agenda on a regular basis. And there was no lines that he wouldn't cross. There was nothing that was going to hold him up. Being that his first YouTube experience was with Gusgri, basically Luis Chaparro let him know, hey man, you created a monster. We always heard that Adela was the one that, platformed Camilo first and put him out there, but really it was Gusgri. He had been speaking to him since the days that Camilo was in prison. Gusgri speaks on his introduction to Camilo and how they would FaceTime from prison, but he wouldn't show his face. He'd basically show him the cell. He'd show him the people around. He said that he was in there, barking orders at people. And at one point, cussing out staff from the prison. Telling them, this is what I pay you for. Get my wife in here. So basically letting it be known that he was throwing his weight around in prison and he had the money to do so. For those that don't know, Camilo Ochoa was part of the Pollo Locos franchise family. So evidently he had the commissary to be able to bark orders in prison. The question that Luis Chaparro pushes is, how did that guy have that kind of pull? Gusgri's answer is, I don't even know. It's what I've been trying to figure out. I've heard so many things. He guaranteed Gusgri that when he was out of prison, he was going to give him the interview. And when he got out, he gave him the interview and it hit hard. He said, yeah, he got on with me and then he got on with Adela and became an influencer by chance. Gusgri thought he became an influencer by chance. Luis Chaparro doesn't think so. Gusgri as well has heard other things, other theories. Luis Chaparro seems to believe he was looking for a way to speak, a platform, and basically use Gusgri to figure it out. Gusgri's understanding is that he felt like Camilo wanted his redemption. And they both agreed that along that road, he slipped up. Everything kind of went left. Gusgri says he interviewed him 3 times, and each time more and more people would come out telling him, stop interviewing this guy. This guy's going to get you in trouble. This guy's in the mix of a lot of foul shit. And basically that he was a scammer and that he had been scamming a lot of people, and there was people hitting up Gusgri every time he interviewed him, letting him know, hey man, you got to let this guy go. This guy's a scammer. This guy's hot. And Gusgri couldn't understand. He was like, a scammer of what? How did he scam you? Had something to do with money. Some kind of, maybe it was some kind of pyramid hustler scheme, something. But it had to do with money that Luis Chaparro says that Camilo used to promote it on his social networks. But these words were getting out to Gusgri. He said at some point he didn't want to go there anymore with him, and he wanted to kind of separate himself because, you know, not only were people warning him, but people started attacking him for these interviews that he was doing with Camilo. He said people started attacking him, telling him, hey man, I met him through you, which you didn't meet him through him. You were an opportunist too. You jumped on somebody that was on the internet. I don't care who they with. You don't got to jump in and make business with them. But he said people were telling him, man, I met him through you and he burned me. That's you. You didn't meet him through me. I didn't. We weren't at an event, and I said, hey man, you should do business with this guy. Nah. So maybe you should think a little bit more before you start throwing money around. People were telling Gusgri that he burned them and they lost millions of dollars or millions of pesos. Luis Chaparro says, well, he was using your name and Adela's name. I mean, you guys platformed him. People are going to use these platforms as their legitimacy. This is my legitimacy. Yeah, you see me on Adela. There's no reason you shouldn't spend your money with me. I'm famous guy. Luis Chaparro asks him if at any moment he asked him, hey man, you fucking around? What are you doing? He never confronted him about it. He said dude would try to get him involved and he'd just be like, no. Again, he got a lot of confirmation from a lot of people saying, man, he stole from me too. He got me. And Luis Chaparro said, well, I'm pretty sure after his passing, you got a whole lot of phone calls about this bread. He said, no. Now they're like, hey, he's done. Luis Chaparro states that a lot of people have hit him up over social media saying that there's a bunch of groups together that are out there now saying, hey man, he scammed all of us. Gusgri said, the big question is who did this to him, and the answer could be a whole lot of people. It didn't have to be just who we thought it was or how it was painted to us. He had no lack of enemy. He had no lack of person that was betrayed by him that was probably willing and able, if they're willing and able to drop all that bread on him, willing and able to drop that bread on somebody to go handle him. Now Gusgri brings up the audio of Minileak, where allegedly it's Minileak on a recording saying, hey, we got all the information about Camilo. We know where he's at. We got this, and this. Luis Chaparro lets him know, yeah, I was the one that published that. We argued about that when we covered the Camilo Ochoa unaliving. My argument was, I don't care if that tape is true or not. That tape had to have been recorded before Minileak went to prison. So in that time, it could have been anybody that went after Camilo. It didn't necessarily have to be about what Minileak was talking about. According to Luis Chaparro, there was 5 audios of Minileak speaking, and that he only published 4 because the 5th one was too detailed, super detailed on Camilo's children's names, their schools. He basically had his life and his routine locked down, so he didn't publish that, which is crazy. He said on the audio that we did publish, he was already saying a lot. So just imagine what he was saying in the stuff that we didn't publish. And Luis Chaparro talks about how he has interviews with Minileak and how he believes that the audio and the voice on that audio is Minileak. He said, but there's another voice on there that's talking to him and getting him the information, and he believes that's the same person that sent him the audio because that person disguised his voice. He didn't disguise Minileak's voice, he disguised his own voice. See, here's my thing with Luis Chaparro. He's saying here, he said, man, people were like, oh, how could it be Minileak on that tape? That tape is, he's in jail. He's like, obviously it was before he was in jail. Of course, part of the clickbait, that's my argument, part of the clickbait is you're not saying that. You say that here in this interview, obviously it was from before. But you're relying on people's ignorance and people's, ability to ask no questions and just consume everything. You basically put it out there like it was, recent. You didn't tell everybody that was a video that was before he was in prison. You let everybody think for themselves. I get it, but miss me with the bullshit. Gusgri asks Luis Chaparro, do you think that audio had something to do with what happened in Cuernavaca, meaning the end of Camilo? And Luis Chaparro thinks so. He thinks it does. Gusgri said there were so many people. He said he even went as far as Monterrey, and somebody just came out and told him, did you know Camilo got this guy for 5 million pesos? So his name was out there and in the shit for him scamming people out of their bread. You gotta be smarter than that. Gotta be quicker than that. He said he stayed and rented multiple houses at one point, and even those ladies told him he even stole the comforters. Comforters weren't safe around Camilo Ochoa. He said they showed him video of him sandwiching up the comforters, folding them up, snatching things like vases and shit. Buddy was just special. Luis Chaparro says, when I saw him on your podcast, it dawned on me, and it felt like to me that he wanted redemption and that he wanted to go on a better path. And Gusgri said, well, it was cunning too. It wasn't just a guy looking for redemption. This guy was already planning his agenda, what he was going to do. Or so that's what a person tells him. He said 2 years before he got out, he told him, I only have 2 years left to get out, but the influencers, the YouTubers, that's the future. They're making millions. And basically saying, listen, there's no ex-narco that's an influencer and I can be that guy. He was basically playing me because then he'd get out and I'd do the interview with him. He's like, nah, I don't want to get involved. I just want to do the interview and stuff. But it was a plan. He said the person that told him all of this told him that Camilo came to him and said, hey man, I want to get into some kind of, service industry business, some kind of, bakery or chicken or something like that. And they were trying to do that work with him. And he was trying to do the YouTube stuff. And then when he realized that the YouTube stuff wasn't the millions that he thought they would be as quick as he thought that they would be, he kind of fell into a position like Mini League, a position where you're a guy that, you're out of prison, you get a fresh new start. You got this YouTube channel that's semi-successful that you could keep growing on, but things don't work out for you as quick as you want them to. You think that it's some lottery ticket, and you find yourself back in the game and subsequently back in prison. When he realized that being an influencer, costs money. And you don't make the millions that you think you're going to make. Not overnight, at least. And in many cases, not at all. In most cases, not at all. Gusgri is saying basically, Mini League he went back to selling work. He said YouTube didn't work out for Camilo like he thought it would, and maybe he backed himself up on the scams. Evidently he did. Evidently he was pushing more scams, taking more bread off the scams than he was out of YouTube. In a world where your data is the product, best move is to disappear. That's why I use NordVPN. Military-grade encryption, blazing fast servers, and access to content blocked in my region. Whether you're streaming, working, or just browsing, NordVPN makes sure that you're anonymous and safe. Go to nordvpn.com/ILL or click the link in the description for huge discounts. Lock your privacy in before someone locks you out. He said, I've seen other people who are in the game, selling, hustling, whatever. They go to prison. They get out of prison and they go the scammer route. Now, I'm not going to dedicate myself to rugs no more, but I could scam and pull some fraud moves. And basically that's a dude that got used to having money and making money, and when all else failed, he started scamming. Luis Chaparro said he thought he was going the right way. He reached out to him right after he did the Mini League interview. If y'all remember, that was a big interview that came out after Mini League was out of prison. He said, yeah, he hit me up and was like, hey, I see you did he hated Damaso. So he's like, I heard you did an interview with that jerk off, whatever. And Luis Chaparro did an interview with Camilo. An interview that Luis Chaparro says that he did, but that he didn't put out, that he saved. He didn't put it out because he felt like the quality wasn't up to par. He didn't put it out because he felt like he was just attacking people, and there was nothing really coherent in the conversation that he felt was worthy of publishing. In my interviews, I always get into the personals of the person, the name, where they come from, what they are. He's like, that's when I learned that he was connected to the Pollo Loco family. Parro knew somebody from that family and was able to confirm that situation. He said even in that interview that he shelved, he said that interview it was even the distractions all over the place. Like, there was stuff going on in his house. He said he didn't like the interview at all. He thought it was just him, talking shit on Damaso, shit that was said already before, and he just didn't want to put it out. So since he didn't put it out, Camilo, who was notorious for recording phone calls and conversations, put out half of the interview or whatever he had recorded, put it out himself. He called Luis Chaparro and asked him, hey man, what's up? You're not putting out that interview? It's been 5 months. He's like, nah, I'm not going to put it out. Camilo leaked that shit himself. And Luis Chaparro make it clear that, Camilo was known for recording phone calls. He said he recorded everything. He screenshotted everything. He must have a crazy archive of communications. Said when his channel dropped, he was doing good. Things was moving up, but the way things happen, things start slowing down. He said while he was interviewing him, people would hit him up and tell him, hey man, that dude ain't the narco that, he thinks he is or he's telling y'all he is. He hung out with thugs and he hung out with, hustlers, but he wasn't that guy. But he was screwed him over. So he was out there scamming criminals. He was out there scamming the bad guys, his guys. He said even in jail, he was scamming people in jail. I mean, a crook is a crook is a crook. When a motherfucker wake up in the morning, he's a crook. When he go to bed at night, he's a crook. While he's dreaming in the bed, crook. He said that when he found out that he had a week to get out of prison, he started hitting everybody up in the prison. Hey, give me some money because we're gonna pull this move, and I'm gonna get out of here. Blah 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 blah. We're gonna make this money, and he was just scamming everybody. He left and he screwed the money. He wasn't worried about it. And they also tell of a story that Luis Chaparro heard where they whooped his ass in jail. They had him, sequestered in a bathroom somewhere, stomping him out. He said they had him in that bathroom for 2 days until he paid up that money. And I don't know how he did it, but he did it. Luis Chaparro said Damaso told him from the beginning, hey man, who's that guy? And he was like, I don't know, Camilo Ochoa. And Damaso's thing, he's like, that's the Pollo Loco guy. He's like, that guy ain't the truth. We gave that little guy a little bit and he got real extra on us and that was it. He said, and that's probably where the thought came that he wasn't who he wanted to be, and it was all a hoax. He ran with thugs, he ran with criminals, and screwed them over, but he wasn't one of them. He said, imagine having the nuts to steal so much money from so many people and people in places that can end you. He said, in a world where, somebody will knock you off for 500, you pissing off the worst of the worst for thousands. He said, we saw that when the Sinaloan War kicked off, the guy picked up a specific flag and beat it to death. He picked his side and he ran with it. It was like he had a death wish. Gusgri said it was like he was asking for it. He said that the day that they ended him, these guys got inundated with a lot of pictures and from everywhere. People, look at this, did you hear about this? He said something interesting that I've wanted to investigate is that of the shots that went through the door that supposedly ended him, there's 2 or 3 of them that come from the inside of the bathroom out the door. And I feel like we spoke about that too. I feel like we were confused by that when we covered this story and we looked at those bullet holes in the door the same way. Like, hey man, something off about that. It looked like he busted back. I remember asking the question, did he bust back? He's talking about how you could tell which are the exit wounds because the splinters are facing outward. He said, I think he busted back at them. He said, I'm very curious. I would love to investigate those shots. They're also talking about some kind of snack bag or something that they throw on the floor in these images of the ended and finished Camilo Ochoa. I don't believe these images were the position in which he fell. I believe they mocked him afterwards. They threw the food down. They put sunglasses on him. They opened his shirt up so that you could see the wounds. They basically had a photo shoot with the man. Gusgri asked him, what do you think that, that food being there or that snack being there, what kind of message was that, a signal was that? Luis Chaparro said he really don't know, maybe a fat joke. And Luis Chaparro's talking about how, Camilo had minutes, what had to be minutes before, filmed himself for his social media in front of the mirror, wearing the same outfit. He said, I am curious about the different versions of the assassination. Some say he got through the subdivision, others say he jumped the back fence, that it was one guy, that it was more than one guy. He said, I will say this, that the investigation's been tight-lipped. He said, I've been trying to get after it. I found a couple of things. Like those type of situations that we were talking about him getting into trouble, scamming people. And some say that it wasn't through the front, that it was through the wall. He said the single shooter version is the one that came out the most. If it's a single shooter, that single shooter had no worries. He wasn't just a single shooter. He was a single shooter / photographer. He had his way with the scene. He wasn't worried. He wasn't in a rush to get out of there. He wasn't speeding away, screeching tires. No, he was opening shirts, throwing down food, taking pictures. He said, but the fact that this information is so secret and so tight-lipped, to me, as a journalist, it tells me that it has some kind of involvement of the authorities. And that's why it's been quiet and covered up. Case closed. He said, you think it's a closed case? He said, yeah, as far as I'm concerned, they closed that case. He said, it doesn't matter what kind of person Camilo was, at the end of the day, you got to investigate. He feels like there's no investigation happening. He said, yeah, I mean, his children will want some kind of closure. He said, yeah, aside from the fact that they were in the house. So I'm saying, were they? This guy was just walking around doing what he wanted to do after he smoked this man. He said he was into that stuff like that. I wasn't surprised. He was directly targeting people and talking crazy. He picked one group and he went after the other group hard, and this is the result of that type of shit. Calling these super gangsters girls, and they eat lizards and they don't bathe, and he was just insulting them all the way. And Luis Chaparro backed him up. Yeah, he uploaded memes and photos and made fun of all of them. Luis Chaparro thinks Camilo was just looking for somebody to beef with all the time. He said the guy used to give me a lot of info. He was always getting info here and uploading this and doing that, and he would pass things on to me before he'd upload it. And he's like, he would give me the information, but I wouldn't push it. And he would tell me, Luis, they believe you. They don't believe shit that I say. And he said I wouldn't give it I wouldn't amplify that type of stuff because I knew he had an agenda. Gusgri's question is why? Why pick one side and just go after the other straight on like that? And Luis Chaparro's theory is maybe they could have, paid the man to do that, which is the accusation to a lot of these guys. And Luis Chaparro says he wouldn't be the first or the last social media influencer that has been paid one way or the other. He said it could have been that, or it could have been his affinity to be, to have the heat on him. He said, I've only talked to him a couple of times. The time that I interviewed him, the time that he told me about you. He said, every time I talked to him on the phone, I assumed he was recording me. Well, you assumed correctly because we heard you talking crazy. Gusgri said, yeah, people used to tell me the same thing. Hey, you better assume that he's recording you. And he said, yeah, I didn't talk to him about nothing crazy. I talked to him about our interviews and the things that we had to do. Now he talks about the recording we heard, all right? We heard the recording of Camilo speaking to Luis Chaparro about Minileak being caught selling rugs after he was a free man, after he was in the witness protection program. We heard Luis Chaparro, talk about how Minileak was a pendejo for doing what he did, and they sounded rather chummy. He's saying that a guy from the FBI contacted him to tell him about this Minileak situation, that Minileak was arrested and subsequently put in jail for selling rugs, something that he was doing while in witness protection after making a successful deal with the United States government and getting nothing of time. Luis Chaparro says he was out of town and he couldn't get to it, and he said then Camilo called him about it and telling him, and then when he did confirm it and he spoke to Camilo, that's the recording that we saw. He said while he was waiting to confirm that information from the FBI agent because he was out of town, he said he looked at his Instagram and Camilo was blowing him up. He said when he did answer the phone for Camilo told him, did you hear about this Minileak situation? And Luis Chaparro was like, yeah, but I haven't confirmed it yet. He's like, man, it happened. And he said that he had all kind of information. He had audio recordings of Damaso Minileak moving rugs. Luis Chaparro said, I didn't ask for them and I didn't listen to them. I didn't hear them, none of that. He said, considering that two people had told me that, and one of those people was somebody that really had a problem with Minileak, I said, let me confirm this. So Luis Chaparro confirmed it, got a photo of Minileak, and he was like, yeah, it's confirmed. That's when he got on the phone with Camilo, and Camilo was recording the conversation, telling him, I told you. I know what I'm talking about. They call me a liar. I'm telling the truth out here. He said the bad thing in the quotes is I say that Minileak is a pendejo for doing what he did. Now, I just felt like you just sound comfortable. I'm not saying it's the wrong thing to say, but you sound comfortable. And he does make it clear, hey, that's just something you say. You would say that about anybody that does something stupid. You got a deal, you get off basically scot-free, and then you put yourself in a position again. It's grounds to call somebody stupid. I'm sure I'm not the only one that was like, I hear you talking. You talking like a gangster. I would have said the same thing. That's a stupid motherfucker. He asks Luis Chaparro, do you think if you would go to prison and then get out, would you shit the bed again? Probably not, but it's hard to speak when you're not in someone else's shoes. He said, people tell me the same thing about my job, really. They say, dude, you're getting threatened all the time. People want you unalived. You gotta have protection and escorts. It's a mess, dude. Why? Why do you do it? Even though it's not something bad, it's not something illegal. And I have a personal conviction that I was born to do this. But a lot of people call me a pendejo. He says, I think about it. If one day I'm unalived, a lot of people are gonna say, we warned that pendejo. But who knows in the person's shoes, how they feel. So that's basically the conversation they had regarding Camilo. To me, the biggest takeaway is how many people were on his ass, how many people he screwed over. People ain't just running around, speaking on their pockets and on their money like that. People don't want you to know that they got scammed. People don't want you to know that they got hustled. The only reason they want you to know is so that you can either beware or help them get their money back. Again, we've questioned if it was one faction or the other, if the Maisa finally had enough, because they did warn him, and they warned him thoroughly to shut his mouth and be done with it. And he did not. But what we're learning from this interview and this conversation between two men who basically platformed Camilo and had personal exchanges and experiences with him, could have been anybody. The amount of scamming he was doing, it could have been anybody. And it probably was. Also, another interesting that came out of it is the idea that Luis Chaparro thinks that maybe there's authorities involved. Why? Because nobody want to talk about this and nobody want to finish this investigation or really investigate this. Hit the like button, subscribe, make sure you leave a comment, tell us what you think. Peace.